welcome back. I am so excited because today I'm having a conversation with Ryan Carson, who is the founder of Carson Law and is also an active lawyer there, and super great one at that. I have been working with him on all kinds of transactions, so I'm really excited to have you here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Very cool. So we're talking a little about real estate, and you know, and you guys know that before we started this journey together, I was asking what kind of questions you have about real estate and your first time home buying. And Ryan, let me be honest, no offense to you, but I did not get a lot of questions about the lawyer's portion. But I actually think it's one of the most critical, because when you and I were chatting, I think the lawyer is the only person in the transaction that you cannot get away with buying a house without. Is that right?
That's right, yeah. In Ontario and in other provinces across the country, typically the lawyer is closing up and registering all the deals, so it makes it official.
Okay, so like your boyfriend can't just go to some like office and register. You need a lawyer.
Absolutely not, no.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about the role that a lawyer plays in a real estate transaction, and can any lawyer do it, or does it have to be a real estate lawyer?
Specifically with Ontario, that's where I practice, you need to be real estate insured with the local law society, so that's number one. So it would need to be a lawyer who is real estate insured.
Yeah, and to the best of my knowledge, I think it's similar in other provinces too.
Yes, it likely is. So the lawyer would need to be real estate insured, so typically that means they're also a real estate lawyer.
Right.
There are lawyers that will do real estate law and real estate closings, but kind of as a very secondary or tertiary part of their practice.
Okay.
So sometimes that's something to be cautious about. Lots of lawyers do real estate because it's cash in and out, so it helps supplement their costs.
Okay.
That's not the way our practice runs. Our practice has a very high volume of real estate, so real estate is one of our main focuses.
So you probably want to work with somebody at a law firm where real estate is a big portion of their business.
Yeah, I mean, I would think so. I mean,
Better to specialize.
Yeah, it's not to say that somebody who doesn't do 100 deals a month is going to be bad at it.
Yes.
Just like somebody who does 10 deals a month could be bad too. So
True.
you have to kind of talk to your lawyer and or potential lawyer and feel that out and see if it's something that fits, and if you feel that they know what they're doing.
So if I'm going to go out and buy a first home, when in my journey do you think is a good time to interview lawyers, start working with a lawyer? Because I don't really know.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good question. I would say the sooner the better. I mean, the sooner you do anything, the better, because then you can be hopefully more prepared. Because especially if you're a first-time buyer, I mean, this is all new. So
True.
The sooner you can kind of collect and gather information, it leaves you more time. It leaves you more time to deal with problems, snags, that sort of thing. So I would typically say I would engage a lawyer the second you're engaging a real estate agent and your mortgage rep.
So before I've even put in offers, you'd recommend that?
I would do that. There's no reason not to. Does it happen? No.
Doesn't happen.
It doesn't,
Okay.
That doesn't happen on the majority of cases. But it would be what I would recommend. I think it makes sense. Get your team in place. Everybody will know each other. Mortgage rep, realtor, lawyer, they'll all know each other at the beginning. They'll all know you're working together.
Yeah.
And then that way, subject to the deal, the lawyer might not be involved until the third phase.
Right.
The final kind of closing and registration phase.
Right.
But you never know. The realtor may say, okay, they're first-time buyers, but they want to buy this property. It's a bit more complicated.
So,
it's good to have us involved, because then we can kind of oversee and maybe give an input from a different perspective that they wouldn't think of.
That makes a lot of sense, because, I mean, obviously, everyone on your power team is coming together with a different skill set, and so, if I am out and I'm looking at properties and I'm about to put in an offer, what would really be the benefit or the insight to maybe sending you the listing or letting you know about the property before I even put the offer in?
Well, I think it's just another set of eyes, another set of professional eyes looking at the deal. We have a different perspective probably than the bank representative and the realtor. I mean, they bring their professional skills to the table and have a specific scope and perspective in mind. But because we're at the end and we're sort of in a unique situation of having to know what we need to know as lawyers, but we kind of have to know a little bit from the mortgage rep and the realtor's perspective too.
Yeah.
And so we're the closer, so to speak. You know, if it's a baseball analogy,
Closer,
if you
I
like
like
the
that.
Blue Jays and everything, we're trying to close this whole transaction up, right?
Got it.
And so if we know earlier in the process and we're involved earlier, especially I'll give you the example of let's say it's a more complicated property, maybe it's got well water. Somebody's buying something outside the city, right?
So like
You know,
not downtown Toronto?
no, not downtown Toronto, but maybe just up in Vaughan.
Well,
or
the one that I
Caledon or
bought
something.
out in Barrie, right?
That's
Federal
right.
water.
Yeah, so if it's a well and or septic, one thing that's unique to that, which maybe the bank person knows, maybe the realtor knows, but maybe they don't, right? Maybe they're newer too, right? Or inexperienced at that kind of transaction and that kind of property. You need a you need the well water certificate. You're not going to get funding. So the sooner you know these things,
The better.
the better. So that's why I think, if you have your 3 professionals in play at the beginning,
Yeah.
I think it's ideal.
And one of the areas I know that you've helped me with is, when putting in the offer, as much as I was working with a great realtor, there were some interesting clauses that you suggested that I put in that probably would have been hard to slip in after we already had an approval. So that from my perspective was helpful.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we worked a lot on, your investor projects and properties, and so those can be a bit different and a bit unique. But the point is well made, which is if we're involved at the beginning, like I said before, we have a different perspective. If we're not involved at that point, which is unfortunately common,
right?
The deal comes to us firm.
There's not much to do.
We're stuck with it, right?
Yeah.
So, and they're stuck with it too. So, and they being the buyer. So if our buyer client is stuck now, this is a firm deal, and then we find out something about the property kind of afterwards.
Yeah.
We have to hope we have a seller who is willing.
Right.
Which is not common.
Right. Okay, so that makes sense. Now, I definitely want to come back and have a chat about what happens if you don't have a realtor, because I know that, with Comfrey, and that can be very popular with private sales, everyone's trying to get a little bit of a better deal, so I know we can sometimes work with a lawyer directly, so we'll get back to that in a second. But in talking about the role that a lawyer plays, so, you mentioned the closer, but walk me through a little bit of what I would do with my lawyer, what my lawyer would help me with, how do we work together?
Yeah, well, I mean, as you've experienced, what we would like to do with a new client is we first find out who they are, gather some information about them, your typical kind of 411 info. Then we'll find out, what's their intention for the property, how do they want to use it.
Yeah.
That's important because sometimes that can be potentially drastically different than how the property is currently used. So the question is, is it set up for them properly? For example, we have clients who want to buy a house in Hamilton or Toronto for rental. And currently it's used as a rental, and maybe it's used as a duplex or a fourplex or something like that, but is it actually zoned that way? These sorts of things are interesting nuances that we like to find out about.
Yeah.
What the client wants to do, because that will have a great impact on is this deal going to be good for you?
Yeah.
And when you close, can you use it the way you want to?
True.
Right? So we find out, who the client is, just some general information. Are they married? Are they single? Are they first-time buyers? Dates of birth? All this sorts of information is needed for any file.
Of course.
And then we find out, how's the property used? How do you plan to use it? Then we'll be asking questions on who are your other team players? Who's your mortgage rep? Who's your realtor? Who's your insurance rep? Just so we can kind of coordinate and bring all the information together.
You're gonna bring all the pieces together.
Bring it all together, yeah. And
Okay.
We'll do title searching as well. So in the agreement of purchase and sale, there's going to be a requisition due date.
Okay. What is a title search? How does that work?
So the title search is with the Land Registry Office.
Okay.
So all across the province of Ontario, there's regions, and that's where the local registry offices are. That's where everything is registered.
Okay, but there are local registry officers.
Yeah,
offices. There are, of course, registry offices all across Canada, right?
Oh, of course,
Okay,
yeah,
perfect.
of course. So Ontario's got, I think, something like somewhere between 50 and 80 registry offices, right? So, that's where the deed, the mortgage, if there's other documents to be registered, are registered. Everything's electronic, so we don't actually have to physically attend the offices
That's
anymore.
a good thing.
So we can look it all up pretty quickly through our computer and our software systems. But we would do a search of title. So what that means is we would pull up the property, we would view the property online to see that they actually own it.
Oh, the seller
The
actually.
seller owns it.
Does it ever happen that the seller doesn't own the property?
I would say very rarely, but there can be nuances to that. Maybe there was a late spouse or something and they passed away,
I
but they're
see.
still on title. So there's things to clean up sometimes about
Okay.
the title. But I mean, the main things we're looking for is yes, they own it.
Okay.
Obviously, number one. Number two is what's in the agreement of purchase and sale is actually the land they own. So are we getting all the parts that make up the actual piece of property that they think they're buying?
And we've heard some like horror stories where people have like
Yeah.
bought the house but not the backyard. Like, is that something
Yeah.
lawyers should catch?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's something that, again, it's kind of that holistic team approach, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the realtor has to put the right information in the agreement, number one, so that this is what you think you're
Right.
buying, and then we check it and we make sure, okay, what's here is in fact what you're getting. But the third kind of component to that is we can look with the client on what's called the reference plan or a survey,
Okay.
which there's typically a reference plan with most registrations of title. So you look at that with the client, you say, okay, look, this is the dimensions, here it is on the street, it's saying it's roughly, 50 by 150. Does that all sound right? It
So you
seems to,
send that to the client, they take a look, you
Yeah.
kind of got a bit of a map, and if it's like, hold on a second, I also thought I was getting
Yeah.
the swimming pool or whatever, that's where you can help identify that.
of course, yeah, that's where it can become very helpful to have that visual
Yes.
review, right?
Right.
So that would be the other piece with the title search is going to be just looking to see, okay, what's against title. So that would be things like the seller's mortgage.
Okay.
Is it a rental property? So could there be assignment of rents?
So it's basically everything that the seller owes that's registered against the property. Is that right?
Yeah, or
Okay.
or other things that impact title and how you'd use it. So these are not things to be overly concerned about, but are there easements? So
What's an easement?
an easement is a right of way for a third party to temporarily have access to the property.
Somebody wants to come on into my property. Who's coming in?
So it could be things like Bell. So Bell
Okay.
could have an easement so they can do work to their phone lines, that kind of thing.
And do we need
Servicing.
to like be careful of easements? Like, does it mean I don't know, can't put a
You-
swimming pool in the backyard, or like, what does that mean?
I think you just need to be aware of where they are
Okay.
on the property. Typically, they run on the boundary lines
Okay.
because obviously a lot of easements are with utilities, so hydro, water, gas, phone, cable.
That makes sense.
Those are the common ones. So if those exist, they try to keep them to the boundary lines, so then you're not interfering with a pool
Right.
or landscaping or something like that.
Right.
But we had an interesting one with a client just closed last week. They do have a rather large easement, but they have a very large property, so we had to check the total size of that easement so it didn't interfere with the fact that they were going to put a pool in.
Oh, interesting.
So
Okay.
it turned out it was fine,
Okay.
and they know where the easement is, so they'll avoid that with their development of the backyard, and they can put their pool in.
Right. So you're saying it also has like all the money that's owing. What happens if the seller has a mortgage, they owe taxes, they've got a bunch of liens registered, and it's more than the value of the property? Does the sale still go through, or like what
Well,
does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, that's very rare.
Is that obscure?
I think in a decade of doing this, I don't even know if I've seen it.
Okay, all right. I'm just making it
may-
up here, but I'm just
may-
trying to think about how this
Yeah,
would
no,
work.
it's a good point. I mean, and the market's kind of in a little bit of flux right now, with the way things have been kind of changing a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll rebound all back.
Well, yeah, and I'm imagining more like, if we're thinking about Calgary or other
Yeah.
parts of the country where maybe we've seen a dip, the value could in fact dip down to points. So I'm
Yes.
just curious if this happens.
Yeah, I mean, again, I can't recall a time where it ended up coming up, and if it did come up, I don't recall a deal not closing. Usually, if somebody's in a situation where they have to pay to sell their house, which is very odd, but
Sure.
if
And
it's
maybe walk away.
if it's come up, they typically know it, and so it's something that they budgeted for, right?
Right.
So I think if it ever came up once or twice in 10 years for me, it was fine. They
Okay.
they were expecting to have to pay to get rid of the house,
Right, okay,
and they did.
okay.
But to your point, what happens if they can't pay or it's a complete shock to them? Well, we have to either like broker some sort of mutual arrangement that allows everybody to kind of still move forward until such time you have enough money to get rid of this thing,
Yeah,
or the deal falls apart,
Deal falls
unfortunately. And then everybody has to lawyer up because you got to figure out who made who's
lawyer up.
who's wrong and who's going to sue
You're
who
wrong.
and how you're going to get stuff. So yeah, hopefully you don't get to that point. Hopefully
Yeah.
you can figure something out. But
Yeah. Okay, so you're gonna check the title. You're gonna see what is registered against the property. We're gonna see about the boundaries, the easement, all that kind of stuff. And when in the process does that happen? So let's just say I've put in an offer. It's been accepted. I've got 5 days to lift conditions.
yeah.
I lifted the conditions. Do you work your magic afterwards? Do you start right away?
Well, I guess it's a two-sided answer because ideally, in an ideal world,
Yeah.
and this is where what you're doing this education process that you're delivering to everybody out there.
Me and you.
Yeah, this is where this kind of stuff can certainly, I think, help people become better at this process, right?
Yeah.
I think it's better for the buyer and for us as a profession if we did it all when it's conditional. So again, if we're used right away early on, so deal comes in, it's conditional, have a search title. Pay us, $150 to search the title ahead of time when it's conditional. 99% of the time, we're not going to find anything really problematic. We're
But
just
if
going to
you
say,
do-
here, this is what's on title. Everything looks fine, go ahead, right? But say we do find something problematic or that's potentially detrimental, at least we can bring it up to your attention and you can address it or you
Yeah.
walk away. But it's
That-
conditional, right?
Right. So then when I am putting in an offer, and maybe I've been doing it wrong all of this time, but Ryan's going to set me straight here. So let's say I've got 30 days that I'm going to close on a property, and I've got 5 days to lift the conditions. Typically, the title search, I've seen the dates
Yes.
like a few days before close. Is that quote unquote
Yeah.
not the
So-
right thing to
Yeah,
do?
so I gave you the ideal answer. The typical way it happens, because we're not involved till much later in the
Yeah.
process as lawyers, we get the deal, and yeah, it could be anywhere from title searches due, 3 to 5 days from closing. Usually it's a week or two from closing,
Yeah.
but that requisition due date, that's when we have to search our title by.
So is it better to have the date later, or is it better to have the date earlier?
Well, I think it's
Like, since we're ideal worlding
yeah,
here.
ideal
right?
world,
Yeah.
you would have it so it's conditional. Like we do the search
Oh,
during
okay.
conditions, right?
Okay.
That doesn't happen very often, if
Right.
at all. So if that's the case and it's more the traditional way it's been flowing,
Yeah.
it'd be better for that real estate agent to at least give the lawyer a buffer of like 2 weeks from the close date. So
Right.
if you're closing on the 30th, let's have Rex by the 15th. And let's have the deal to
And
the
who
lawyer
does
by
the
the
rec?
1st.
Who does the requisition? Is that you? Is that when I give you
Lawyer's
the purchase
office,
and
yeah.
sale?
So you would have the agreement to us. Let's say you gave it to us on the 1st
I
of the
give it
month.
to you right away, yeah.
It closes on the 30th. Recs are due on the 15th.
Does
We're gonna
it
do the
say
searches
anywhere
between
the
that.
requisition is due on the 15th, or is that behind the scenes?
It says in the agreement of purchase and sale. Yeah.
Okay, so the date. Sorry, we can totally cut this out. Now I'm just learning, really. Although this could probably be super helpful. Okay, it says title needs to be searched by, or there's
Yeah,
one date in there that goes with the title
It's
search.
typically on page 2 of the agreement of purchase and sale.
There you go.
I think it is paragraph 7, 8, or 9.
Somebody knows your stuff.
And it'll say the property is being represented as, and then there's a blank spot to put
Correct.
single family residential.
Yes, I know the spot.
Condo, whatever, and then there'll be a date. And
Should that date be
that
the
date's your rec date.
15th?
So in our example of we
'Cause
get it on the 1st, it closes on the 30th.
Yeah.
I'd say make it the 15th, no later.
Okay, that's really good to know. I've always done what everyone else does, 3 days before close. But
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
good to know.
you can pick any time. The only reason, like I said, it's good to have a buffer of a couple
Yeah.
of weeks is then if there is a problem that we didn't know about before when it was conditional, it gives a couple of weeks for the lawyers to hash it out to say, okay, here's the
What's going
problem.
on?
What are we gonna do?
And I think everything when it comes to sort of specialty lawyers is about like preparing for the worst case scenario so
Yeah.
that like we are ready to go. Like buying your house is the single biggest purchase you're making.
is.
and you don't want to have surprises, and you don't want to be stressed out.
Absolutely, for sure. And I think a lot of people, this is just my little like 2 cents now, a lot of people have commoditized this sort of process. They're just kind of like, oh, it's buying a house. It's not a big deal. It's easy.
It's a big deal.
It's just like buying jeans. It's not like.
It's not like buying.
Last time I bought a pair of jeans, they weren't.
Now I will tell you,
$500,000, so
buying
or
a
$1
pair
million or.
buying a pair of jeans as a lady is definitely more difficult than for a gentleman. But yes, nowhere near the complexity.
You're not
of
just going to buy your Wranglers?
No.
Okay.
No, I gotta try on a whole bunch of pairs. I gotta see like where my butt looks good. It's like, that's important stuff,
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, back to buying the house. So we know that you're gonna do the title search. I've lifted the conditions. The realtor has helped sign all that stuff.
Yeah.
What else is happening in the background? What other documents do you need? Because, part of how I see the real estate process is that it's a little bit fragmented, right? So there's some pieces I do with my insurance broker, some with the mortgage broker, some with the realtor, some with you. Like, what's happening in the background, and how do you bring it all together?
Yeah, so that's why we try to make the first part of our process with the client is that all that data collection, that information collection. And so unfortunately for the client, it can be a bit redundant because they're kind of like, oh, I've already given this information to other people.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we don't have it yet, right?
Right.
So we want to make sure that we know who the mortgage rep is, the realtor, the home insurance company.
Yeah.
If it's a condo in Toronto, we want to know the property management company.
Okay.
All those, if we know all of that information and the client comes prepared with that, and we have that, then we can start behind the scenes, talking to everybody, right? So we can go to the mortgage rep and say, hey, we haven't got the mortgage instructions yet. When do we get them, right? If it's not a condo, but it's a house, well, we can go to the home insurance rep and say, okay, we don't have the insurance binder yet. This is who the mortgage is with. We need it.
So typically, does the purchaser get involved to bring those documents together, or is it you typically?
They may. I mean, we try to make it as easy as possible for our clients. So that's why if we front load the process and gather the information and the client's helpful in giving us that info, then for us, the nice part is we have it. We can just go to these different professionals, the insurance, the mortgage, the property management company, the bank, and we can just basically say, this is what we need. We're the lawyer. Can you send this to us?
All the documents,
80% of the time, that's fine. They'll end up giving it to us.
Yeah.
With privacy laws becoming more and more restrictive, especially with insurance, the client may need to be a bit more involved. They may need to actually contact, or they may actually need to get what we need. But my staff, my team will be very good at saying,
go ask for this.
Here it is. We're spoon feeding. This is, you don't have to think, you just deliver and tell them to get it to us.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
And so then once you've got all of the documents, then and it's like a couple days before closing. I'm assuming it's a couple days before closing, or is it day of typically? Like, what do you find for all the like millions of signings?
No, you're right. Like we will want to meet with our clients at least 2 days before closing, like 2 to 3 days.
So that's a good watch out, because I've heard people being like,
buy.
oh, I'm closing on the 17th. I'm coming home from Jamaica on the 16th at night. But there's stuff that needs to be done, right?
Yeah, 9 times out of 10, so on a purchase, a sale, you can meet probably the day before or the day of.
Right.
Typically, because the signing documents for that is a bit more standard.
Right.
In a single family transaction. And we can do a lot of the processing behind the scenes.
They are going to have to come and meet you a couple days before.
Yeah, so a purchase usually a couple days before, because the mortgage companies need time to process. So
I see. So once they sign everything, there's still stuff that has to happen.
Yeah, we send stuff off to insurance if we haven't already. We send stuff off to the mortgage companies.
Yeah.
Then they have to work back and forth with us on actually processing, approving, and funding.
Got it. So I've heard from some first-time home buyers that the whole signing process can be really overwhelming. It feels like you're giving your first child away. There's like so many things to sign. Do you typically send the documents in advance, or do you let clients come in and read them through, or is it like sign right here, right now in blood? Like,
yeah. Now the fact of giving them documentation ahead of time, that's something you and I had talked about before today's meeting. So that's something we're gonna, as a team at my office, consider, because it's an interesting idea to do.
There you go. Great idea.
In practice, no.
It's hard. Sometimes the timelines are like...
The timelines are very tight, especially with higher volumes, especially in a busy month like July and August. But
And
it's
that's a
something
good
to
point, because
consider.
lots of people are closing in the summer, probably end of the
Yeah.
month type of thing.
It's a good idea, I think, to try to close earlier in the week. It's not necessarily ideal for trying to coordinate moving and everything and days off
Huh.
work, but like a lot of people like Friday, Monday closings because you can kind of buffer with your weekend, I think, right, with the moving.
Is there any
But-
benefit as to like why that's become industry practice or realtors
Yeah.
are suggesting it? I mean, I get close on a Friday, you have the weekend to move in, but is there any?
I think it's just like anybody else. Realtors want to try to have some consistency
Yeah.
with the way they're paid as
Yeah,
well. So,
interesting.
you know, if they're able to, if they're busy
Yeah.
and they're doing, you know, frequent deals and they can kind of, you know, without it being a problem for their client, suggest that, hey, well, let's try to close on a 15th or a 30th or like the second and the
something like
last
that.
Friday of the month. It gives them consistency.
I've
so I
actually-
think that's what's happened.
Yeah,
So-
I've actually taken up the habit of closing on a Monday or a Tuesday because
Yes.
one of the first properties
Good idea.
I bought, actually I got a little bit burned because I was closing on a Friday. And in that instance, the funding didn't come through, and then there was bridge financing, and I had to pay fees for Saturday and Sunday
Mhm.
and Monday as the buyer because the money hadn't come through from the bank. So I was like, I'm never closing on a Friday again. So,
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think,
all right.
again, if it doesn't affect the client's ability to take time off and moving, if you can close Tuesday, Wednesday,
Yeah,
it's ideal.
ideal.
If you look at all the big builders,
Yeah.
like Mattamy, for example, they only close on Wednesday, Thursdays.
Hmm.
They try to do all their closings on off days because they know those are the weaker days.
All right, now we got an inside hacker scoop. So Tuesday, Wednesday, maximum Thursday.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so that's when we're closing, but we were actually, before we got to closing, just talking about the process of signing all of the documents.
Yeah.
So maybe
Yes.
sent in advance, maybe not, but even when somebody comes in, do you have the time, do you try to explain it to them? Because and part of it, let's be honest, comes down to personality because, I've had people say, oh, I went to the closing and like my lawyer wasn't willing to answer questions. And I was like, well, how many questions did you ask? She was like, well, I didn't ask any because he looked so scary, So there's a personality element that comes into it for sure. But like, you do this all day, every day. This is their first and biggest and probably only time for the next 5 years. So
Yeah.
how do you try to make people feel a bit more comfortable in that process?
Well, hopefully my personality comes off pretty approachable.
Oh,
But maybe
You
not.
weren't that scary.
Maybe not. But yeah, no, like my colleague and I that do all the real estate closings.
Yeah.
Like first of all, we try to meet the clients as lawyers. I know every firm doesn't do that. So that's kind of, if you're out there looking for a lawyer and you're asking questions and trying to get an idea of like, is this the right fit for me?
Yeah.
That might be one of the questions you ask, like, are you actually going to meet the lawyer and sign the closing documents
Oh,
with
that's a
them,
good
right?
point.
Because it's not required for that to be the case.
Can you sign online? Like digital? No.
No,
Okay.
you can't. But a lot of lawyers will offshoot it to like their staff.
Oh,
which,
I see. Okay.
Not to say that like staff
Different
sometimes know a
businesses,
lot,
right?
right? And, they know a lot, but you're paying for lawyers. From my perspective, is you should see the lawyer. Otherwise, what's the point, right?
Yeah.
So-
Well, you showed up here today, so.
Mhm.
Could've-
So you paid me.
No, I didn't.
So anyways, like we create an hour block for
Right.
all our appointments.
Okay.
Does it take that long? No, like you and I will probably sign a deal in 15 minutes, but that's
Okay.
because you're very, you're comfortable with
Right,
this,
but
right?
if I wanted to ask you a question about like every line,
Oh, yeah,
you would be
if-
okay with that?
Yeah, and that's why we book it for an hour, because I think even if you wanted to sit there and read every single document, like word for word.
You'd be okay with that?
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, I'm not gonna.
It's a pretty important document you're signing out.
Absolutely. I mean, I try it because I know what they all say. I mean, because I've been doing it, 900 times a year.
It's no pair of jeans.
Yeah, it's not very gene. I will certainly try to say to them, this is what it says.
Right,
You know what I
this
mean?
is what
Like,
it means.
you certainly feel comfortable and go ahead and read every line
Yeah.
as you wish.
Yeah,
But this is what it says.
right.
And I mean, the whole point is they hopefully, even though they're only knowing you for a very short period of time and
Yeah.
meeting you maybe for the first time, hopefully they understand that, hey, you can trust us because, well, this is what you hired us to do. bottom line is they have the hour. I think that would be more than enough time for them if they wanted to read every single line
Right.
of a document. They could.
They could, okay.
And they could ask me as many questions as they want. And I'm never going to, hopefully.
You're not going to roll your eyes at
I'm
them?
never going to give them a feeling of, what are you talking about? Or, hopefully I'm not going to belittle them or be condescending, right?
Right.
Hopefully at the end of the day, especially if it's their first time. I mean, this is what we should expect, right?
Right.
And we want them to be very happy and comfortable with us, at least in our practice, because we offer other services within our firm, and we want them to kind of think of us like they think about their doctor, Like you want to go to them when you have a medical problem, or when you have a legal question or problem, you come to see us. Maybe I'm not going to service that problem, because it might be outside of what I'm practicing, but we know other lawyers and we can get you referred like a specialist.
Yeah. No, I totally get that, and I think trust is so important with all of your power team members, especially your lawyer. But one of the things that I really always recommend to people, and I do a lot of, is I like to ask 1,000,001 questions. I want to make sure that I understand it in my mind, because I want to know what I've just signed. I want to know what are the implications, and so questions I think are a good thing.
Questions are a great thing. I mean, because we do it so much, so often, sometimes we can lose sight of something maybe obvious, right?
Yeah.
We try to make it so that our system, we've tried to take a lot of time to make our system not feel cold, but be thorough.
Yes.
So that when it is really busy for us,
you're not just
we're not
pushing
missing
through
something.
Yeah.
Right? If you're just trying to do it one off and off your cuff, then if it's not systemized, then that's when you miss stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
If we have a thorough system, not to make it cold, but to be thorough, then we don't miss something, hopefully. And then they feel, hopefully, they feel as though, hey,
someone's looking out for me.
They're really involved in this. I feel comfortable with them. I feel like I can just ask them the questions.
Totally.
I mean, we're approachable by email and phone. A lot of the people out there watching are probably going to be very, apt to email and
you are probably one of the fastest email responders I know. I give you that award for sure.
Perfect. There's my award. For
there you go.
2017.
There you go. Fastest email responder. Well, I think that's a really good award to win in 2017.
It is.
It's true. So let's talk about something that I know is a big stigma, or people are very concerned about when it comes to lawyers, and that is the legal fees.
Mm-hmm.
In that, if I'm buying this property and you're my lawyer and I have a lot of questions, are you billing me for every second that I don't understand what you're saying, and every question that I'm asking for clarification?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of legal fees are usually associated with buying a property, and do you bill for every question? How does that work?
Yeah. You have to kind of check with the lawyer.
Okay.
A lot of lawyers who are predominantly real estate focused will do their billing as what's called a block fee or a flat fee.
Okay.
So they just sort of say the transaction is a purchase, it's X dollars per purchase, right?
So then if I have a question about that purchase, you're not necessarily billing me over for that?
We don't know. So again, you have to double check with your lawyer.
Right.
I would go on the presumption, again, if they're already saying it's a flat fee, that per email, per phone call is not being billed on top.
And I think that is such a great benefit in the structure for first-time home buyers.
You want to create certainty for them in budget.
Well, and I've heard several times over, from people who we were talking about the legal fees during the transactions, and I said, if you're not sure about this, ask your lawyer. They're like, but that's going to be a $350 question. And I was like, you're buying a $500,000 property. First of all, $350 is not a big deal. But secondly, if they had done the research and the conversations up front to know there are lawyers you can work out there. Now, obviously, I'm not expecting someone to take advantage of you and send you 1,000,001 questions, but just to make sure that they know what they're doing in the transaction.
Yeah, and I mean that again, it goes back to sort of the process and the thoroughness of it. We try to constantly review it and tweak it to make sure that if something comes up, and maybe nobody's perfect, so you want to make sure you're constantly looking on. We want to constantly be looking at it, reviewing it, revising it to make it as perfect as possible.
Yeah.
So that it's thorough, and so hopefully the process itself answers questions, and a lot of them, right?
I like that.
We don't want them not to feel like they can't call us, not at all.
Right.
But we want them to kind of just give us the information we need,
Yeah,
answer the questions we're gonna ask you anyways.
yeah,
And then if you still have the questions, of course.
For sure.
Call or email us, right?
for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
Now, at the time of closing or just before, you're gonna put together, a couple of statements and documents.
Mhm.
For a first-time home buyer, I know there's some rebates, I know there can be some adjustments. Maybe can you explain a little bit about how both, like, rebates work
Yeah.
as well as adjustments and what you would do with that one?
Yeah, so the financial documents that you'd see with a lawyer, there's one called a statement of adjustments.
Okay,
So that typically has on it purchase price, deposit, property tax, if it's a condo fee.
yeah,
Those are the kind of the main ones.
okay,
Depending on what the property is, there could be propane,
yes,
there could be well and septic
Right.
adjustments. Yeah, I mean, there can be other ones, but the main one is purchase price, deposit, property tax.
okay, so those will go on the statement of
Those three
adjustment.
will always be there, right?
Is that, and where do the rebates go, like if there's a land transfer rebate or something
Yeah,
like
if
that?
they're a first-time home buyer and they qualify for the land transfer tax rebate, then that's included within the fund summary.
Okay, so they don't
So-
actually have to apply
don't have
for
to
it,
do
get a
anything.
check in the mail later,
No.
you will do, if they meet the criteria, you will
Our
take care of it.
office files and makes it so it's right on registration.
Right.
Some offices don't.
Ooh, that's a good question to
They
ask.
actually have a piece of paper the clients would sign, and so they pay full pop, and then it gets, the rebate comes back to them.
Right,
But you can do it, and I would say most lawyers who are doing real estate,
do it right on the spot.
yeah,
Yeah, because we want to make sure that we're prepared for closing costs.
yeah. So it's a credit right there.
Okay,
So it's
so
it's
on the
already
spot.
it's already netted out. So the amount of money at the end of the day that we're gonna ask you for as a balance due on closing
Yep,
will be net the rebates.
right,
Will be net the adjustments for deposit and property
Okay.
tax and anything else. And then it'll be in addition to, if there is a balance of land transfer tax,
right,
that amount. Your government registration fees are $150 if you have a deed and a mortgage,
okay.
right? And then
These are some of the fees that are
the
going to be
legal
coming.
account.
The legal accounts.
Yeah.
So, at what point in time does a first-time home buyer know exactly how big the check is that they have to write to their lawyer? And I'm sure you see times where there's surprises. People are like, what? I thought it was this. I thought it was that. Do
Yeah.
you see surprises? And when do people know what this looks like?
I think at the beginning of my career, there was probably more of that because I was learning too.
Okay.
So, my process and everything wasn't as thorough as it is today.
Mm-hmm.
I think for the most part, most of our clients are fairly educated through the process, so I wouldn't say we have too many people having a big surprise.
So do you tell them, or does the mortgage broker tell them? Who's going to sort of say, in 2 weeks
Yeah.
you need to give us a check, or you need to give your lawyer a check of
Well,
X, Y, Z?
I'm sure the mortgage broker will have some sort of conversation
Okay.
with them about, okay, this is, what the financing looks like.
Yeah.
With all due respect to their profession, sometimes they miss some things.
And there may be some things that are in your specialty.
Because they don't know, per
Yeah.
se, or are unfamiliar, or are just like, well, that's the lawyer. I'm not going to worry about telling you about that, right?
Yeah.
But that being said, at the end of the day, we will tell them an amount to bring in because
Okay.
that's what we need, right?
And do they need to bring that in cash or check or?
It'll either have
Draft.
to be three things: a certified check, a bank draft, or a wire.
Or wire, okay.
So
And
those
do
are
they
the
bring
three
that
forms.
2 days before when they sign everything, or?
That's going to depend a little bit on timing.
Okay.
It'll depend on once we've been able to figure the amount out. That's number one.
Right.
Which will be dependent a little bit on getting final clarification from the mortgage company on what are we getting,
Right. Okay.
right? So once we know that number, we obviously would like to try to time it so when they come in for the appointment, they've already known about the number ahead of time. They've
Okay.
been given the statement of adjustments, the fund summary. They can look at it,
Right.
ask us questions,
Right.
and then that way when they come in, it's just
Here's everything. I know exactly what it
numbers all
is.
make
All the
sense
numbers
to
make
me,
sense.
and
Okay.
here's your draft.
Okay,
Yeah.
very cool. Okay, so let's back up. Something that we started at the beginning of this conversation is if somebody doesn't want to use a realtor, they want to save their realtor costs, and there's a big debate about if buyers actually are responsible or they're not. Obviously the seller is the one who's technically paying, but often you're paying by the purchase price being higher. So, I hear especially more informed and educated buyers sometimes saying I don't really know if I want to use a realtor. Can I just work with a lawyer to draft the purchase and sale agreement? I can do the house hunting on my own. Do you ever see that? And if you do, what role do you typically play in helping those first-time buyers?
Yeah, I mean, buyers can just do it.
Does it happen
Do
a lot?
not do it on their own. They can not use a realtor, and they can just approach the people who are selling directly. Usually, in that instance, the buyer will have talked to us ahead of time to say, "Okay, I'm thinking of making an offer. This is the property.
Right.
I'm not going to be represented by an agent or anything. Can you help me draft an offer of purchase?"
And that's something you can do?
Yeah, so we have access to the same forms, and we have our own forms as well that we can use for a purchase agreement.
Okay.
But we have access to the same forms that the real estate agents do as well. So if the client's instructing us to prepare a private offer, then we can.
Right. So again, flat fee. So I'm just trying for people to think about what options they may have depending on their personality and their own background experience.
Normally our fee to prepare a private offer would be about $250 to $500.
Okay, so in the grand scheme of things, that's not really that expensive.
Yeah. So I mean, if it turns out there's a lot of revisions and back and forth,
Of
then
course,
we'll tell
there's
them,
always.
we'll tell them, okay, that fee's going to go up a bit.
Right.
But
it's just another option.
Yeah, it's another option, and we quote them the price up front. It's $250 to $500.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's really helpful to know. Now, what happens when, especially with millennials, this happens a lot. They aren't necessarily qualifying for the mortgage on their own. So, I mean, sometimes they've gotten a gift from their parents, their grandparents, aunts, uncles, for the down payment. But in instances where, property prices are super high in some of Canadian cities, the family gets involved in terms of qualifying for the mortgage. So they're co-borrowers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not asking you any of the accounting questions about that, but when it comes to being registered on title, is everybody on the mortgage registered on title always? How does that work?
So the rule for Ontario, and I would expect it to be similar in other provinces, will be if you're shown on the mortgage as a co-borrower,
yes,
then you must be registered to the deed. So you have to be on ownership, which, as you alluded to, can have fairly significant impacts from a tax perspective.
Right.
Capital gains being the biggest one, right?
Yes. Which is why I started with, I'm not asking you to answer as an accountant, I'm looking for your perspective.
So the rule of thumb is if they're a co-borrower, they must go on title.
Okay.
If they are a guarantor
yes,
on the mortgage, which is specifically different.
I don't think there's as many of those. I think it's harder to qualify these days, but that's a mortgage broker question.
The banks have gotten away from
guarantors.
From that being what they want to see.
Right.
I mean, the net result really at the end of the day is it's the same thing, in my opinion.
Right.
I mean, you have somebody else on the hook to pay the bill if I
skip town,
thanks,
Mom.
not paying. So whether a guarantor or borrower,
yeah,
in my opinion, the banks really it shouldn't be a problem. They should be able to do it as a guarantor.
Let's have a chat with them about that.
But we'll have to talk to them about that and why that's the case, right? But I know you can do it.
Yeah.
Right? So
in the instance when it goes onto title, so anybody who is a borrower has to be on title, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And so then there's a choice, if I understand correctly, with being registered on title. So if it's like, I'm buying a place and my mom is a co-borrower, we don't necessarily have to be 50-50 owners on title. Do we have an option? Like, can she own less? Can she own more?
Yeah, there's two primary ways of holding title.
Okay.
You can be a joint tenant, or you can be tenants in common. So joint tenancy.
Let's explain the jargon.
If we own a house together,
Okay.
we're joint tenants, which is common with spouses. A lot of times spouses register as joint tenants.
We're not married, by the way.
We're married.
He's got another lovely wife.
So if you're a joint tenant, then
Okay.
that means if I die,
Yes.
there's an automatic right of survivorship. You own the house.
Oh.
Regardless, and the percentages have to be even. So if there's two of us, we're 50-50.
Got it.
If we have a colleague with us as well, now we're thirds, right? So there's
So-
always in joint tenancy equal portion
Yeah.
and right of survivorship. With tenants in common,
Can I pause you there for 1 second just to
Yeah.
make sure I got this? So if I am a borrower and my mom is a borrower and we are joint tenants, did I say that right?
Mhm.
Joint tenants. We each own 50% of
Yes.
the property from a title standpoint, and if I pass away, my mom gets the property, no questions asked, and if my mom passes away, I get the property, no questions asked.
Correct.
Okay, cool. I just want to make sure that I got
Yeah.
that right before we move on to the next one.
No, that's right. So if you're a tenant in common,
Okay.
you could still, same scenario, same example, you and me.
Yeah. We're still not married.
We're not married. So yes, if we're together on the property,
Yeah.
and we're doing tenants in common,
Yeah.
but let's say I'm just really helping you to qualify,
Right.
your example with
Thanks,
the
Rob.
parents and stuff. So I don't really want to own any of this thing, but I have to own a little bit.
Right.
I could be put on as a 1% owner,
Okay.
and you're 99% owner. Which the
That
good,
works for me. I like that.
which the good part about that is, let's assume in 3, 4, 5 years time when the renewal comes up with the mortgage, the new buyer is making more money. They
Yeah.
can qualify on their own now. So you do a 1% transfer back to just.
Got it. To get
yourself.
it back to me.
Yeah.
Okay. So
And
it
then-
gives you flexibility.
It gives you flexibility. It means any tax implication is going to be only on 1%. So that
Got
should
it.
be very nominal
Okay.
on a gain. And land transfer tax will be nominal
Right.
because you're
It's
paying
just-
1%.
1%. Okay.
Yeah.
And so we will have a conversation with an accountant for like, what does that mean from a dollars or tax perspective? I won't push that on you, but that's really good to know. And so, do you typically ask when there's co-borrowers how they want to do it, or do they have to ask you?
Well, that'll kind of come out in our process, or normally tries to come out at the
Okay,
beginning
in
of
the
the
good
process
questions that you're asking.
where we're saying, who's going on title,
Right.
what's happening here, who's
Yeah.
with the mortgage.
Yeah.
When we're gathering all the information, it's possible though, when we do that beginning process, they tell us one thing because they understand it to be one way.
Right.
Then the mortgage instructions come in, and all of a sudden there's
Looks
like
different.
mom and dad, and we're like, who is John and Joe?
Right. Okay.
So.
Okay, very cool. All right, last kind of area of questions, just that I want to cover is, all right, so I'm buying a first house. I'm super pumped. I have never really like owned a significant asset before. I mean, maybe I had some money in down payment funds that were saved.
Mhm.
Talk to me about getting a will. Is that something that most real estate lawyers do? Do you have another division that does that? How does that typically work? And when is the right time to maybe get a will
Yeah.
in the home buying process?
Yeah, I mean, you could get it really at any time. There's not a right or a wrong time. Ideally, I would say.
Don't I need to have a house before?
Well, I think everybody should really have a will. I mean, if you've got other assets and stuff.
Okay,
it's
let's
good to
say
have a
that I
will.
haven't gotten a will and I was waiting till I bought a house, because before
Yeah.
I just kind of.
You don't necessarily have to wait. No.
Okay, so you don't have to.
No, the way we draft the wills up, you don't have to. But that being said, most people will just wait and they'll dovetail it to
Yeah.
coincide with the closing of the house.
Yeah.
That way you could sign your will at the same time, maybe, if you wanted to.
So back to sort of a nuance of that question is, do real estate lawyers also do wills? You have to have an estate lawyer. Like, do they usually like, does a firm have like different sections or specialized lawyers within it?
Yeah, I mean, again, it kind of comes back to everybody's a little bit different, but I would say a lot of real estate lawyers will practice in wills and estates too.
Okay. Is
They-
it a different
they kinda-
certification?
No.
Okay.
Well, like lawyers, basically, when they get their license, I mean, they're licensed for all areas.
Okay.
A lot of people just practice in one or two areas because there's so much to know. It's
specializing.
impossible to kind of do everything.
Right.
To be the jack of all trades. So, but real estate, wills, estates, my practice is also corporate work as well for small and medium-sized businesses. So I kind of do all three. I wear the three hats.
Okay.
Just because they kind of all sort of circulate around with each other.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean the process of getting the will, there's no right or wrong time to do it.
Right.
If you have a house, definitely
You need one.
you should be considering having one.
Yeah.
There's no reason not to.
Well, especially there's so many like blended families in different scenarios.
Yeah.
Like, you probably want to just have made a decision about what would happen to your assets if something
Sure.
should happen.
Yeah. And I mean, especially too, like, it's important to review your will if you have a will in play, or if you don't have one, look at getting one in that 99.1% scenario we talked about.
Right. Okay.
Because if you recall the difference between joint tenants and tenants in common, joint tenants, I die, just goes to you.
Right.
That's easy, right?
Right.
Tenants in common, though, that's not the way it works. Tenants in common, I die, my 1% doesn't go to you automatically. It goes into my estate. So I need to specify in my will, my 1% goes to you.
That feels like it could have a lot of complex nuances.
It could.
Depending on the
but-
estate and all that other kind of stuff.
It could, but it could
Could be easy.
it could be boiled down pretty easy.
Okay, all right. Well, that's definitely good to know. And so then, if somebody is working with a real estate lawyer and they also do wills, do they ever? Is it common to have bundled pricing or there's a benefit? I mean, especially if you were supposed to have one before and you didn't.
Yeah.
Is there a benefit to maybe doing the two together?
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, we're I'm a lawyer, but I'm a businessman too, so we like to help people out. So if it makes people gives them incentive to get the wills and powers of attorney done, to give them a preferred price to bundle services together, then we'll do that.
There you go.
Especially.
So you always gotta ask. I like that.
Yeah, you ask and then we can talk about it. You might not always get, but ask and
Right.
we can certainly talk about it.
And I'm sure even, if there isn't about the pricing per se, there's an element, we've already talked about so much, what's going on in my life, who I am, all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Probably in a better position to help me draft a will. It'll be faster than starting the conversation all over again with another lawyer, right?
Correct. Yeah. And something we're doing, just one of the most recent revisions we're doing with our process is when we send information out to buyers, it'll have a will package with it. So they'll have it already with them.
I like it because I don't know that everybody necessarily remembers that, right? You're so eager, you finally got the keys, you moved in, you just want to collapse with exhaustion, but there's actually more things to be done at that point in time.
Yeah, usually most people say I'll come back and see you later, which is fine because 50% or so of the time they do.
Yeah.
So that's.
Well,
great.
we just want to make sure that we're protected. It's not necessarily about any other reason than being financially fabulous, right?
Exactly.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, Ryan, thank you so much.
You're
A wealth
welcome.
of information. Really, really appreciate it. And you're available to work with first-time home buyers in Ontario, right?
Correct.
Okay. You got to know that because your lawyer is bound by the province that you are purchasing in.
That's correct.
Yes, there we go. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you, Limor.
All right. Thank you.